Good morning, everybody. Very warm welcome to all our audience here, and warm welcome to everybody watching on the live stream. My name is Dave Phillips from DW Drums. Very honoured to be part of the DW 50th anniversary celebrations. This is day 4 of 5 days of concerts, clinics, talks. We had Meet the Makers a couple of days ago with the guys from the Shell Shop. Yesterday, Louis, who does all the artisan finishes. Today, we're going to be talking with Don Lombardi, founder of DW Drums, Ruben Steinhauser, Rich Sikra, Vice President of Product Development, and Conor Lombardi. They're going to be talking about all the amazing inventions that solve problems for drummers. If anybody online wants to ask any questions on the YouTube channel, please type in your questions there, and we'll also be taking those as well. Enjoy. Welcome to the guys.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I'm going to start this out by first saying that my goal for this, and I talked to the team about this, was to give you guys a little bit of insight of the innovation at DW and how we've come up with some of the products we've come up with. How we started out really scrappy. Really one person, 2 people, you and John, and then how it evolved from that. So that's the innovation part. The other thing is a little bit about fate, which I wasn't a believer in fate until I looked back at the last 40 years almost. So we'll talk about that. And then the last thing I want to talk about is a little bit of mentoring. And I won't go into details now, but that's been a big part of DW. So
talking about fate, one thing that looking back through the years, people say, what do you think that you did that was a big accomplishment? And it was always like picking the right people and putting them in the right place, I guess. And there's a little bit of a story about that with Rich Sikra here. So tell them a little bit of the history, how DW started, obviously in Santa Monica, close to here. And then once we had the opportunity to start making pedals and stands, we moved to Gardena, right. Because a guy that was supplying me one part for the seat, which I had invented before Camco, the little brace that goes on the inside, had a trash business in the Gardena area, and he was a recycling guy, and there was a house in front of it that was abandoned. So he said, if you want to, I don't know that it was ever legal in those days even, but he said, if you want to rent this house for me very cheaply, you could move in there. And we moved in a drill press. It was John and I at that point. I remember like it was yesterday, because John's an innovative guy. He had his motorcycle. He was working on it. So dropped off a drill press. My brother did. I said, John, you know how to work a drill press. He said, no, I've never worked. I said, I've never worked one either. We got to start making pedals. We got to start drilling things, getting them happening. So we got a lathe, and John taught himself how to use that, but you're making one part at a time, fabricating it on a lathe, which is really time-consuming and a lot of labor involved. And we looked across the street from where we were, and we saw...
They saw my uncle's machine shop, and actually my great-uncle, so it was my dad's uncle. I didn't know I had an uncle. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I'll fast-forward it a little bit here.
The name of the shop was?
JIL Tool Company.
Tool Company. So we saw the word tool, and John was like, maybe they can figure out a better way to do this.
Yeah, so my uncle ended up helping them out quite a bit over the years and eventually became a vendor and manufactured quite a few parts that were on the original 5000s. I'm a kid in Pennsylvania, and I decided I wanted to play drums for a living. So in 1984, I pack up my... I don't even know what it was, El Monte car, 1977 El Monte, drive to California as a 20-year-old, find out then that I have an uncle in California who knows Don, who makes parts for DW. Coincidentally, I owned a couple DW pedals at that time. So in 84...
And went to school here. You went to...
Yeah, I went to MI.
With famous drummers.
I went with Kurt Biscaro. I went with Frank Gambale. I went with Enzo Tedesco. I found out I was a very small fish in a big pond. In Pennsylvania, I was pretty good. California, I got put in my place pretty quick. So fortunately, I got to meet Don, got a tour of the factory. And I don't know if you remember this, Don, but I think my uncle may have arranged this. But a friend and I, shortly after getting to California, my uncle said, hey, I arranged a tour of DW. So we drove to Newbury Park, and it looked like a big shop to me, but I think at the time you had probably 10 employees maybe. It was just a lot of individual industrial units lined up. As they grew, they rented another unit, and we did a tour. Then at the end of the tour, he said, go over to that shelf there and pick out any double pedal you want. I'm like, nobody could get a double pedal. Nobody could get a DW pedal, period. They were so back-ordered. I walk up and he gave it to me. I still have it. I actually have it in my car. And it's exactly like the pedal sitting over there if you guys get a chance to look at it. But it's the original 5002 pedal. And we actually cleaned it up a little bit the other day because from playing all the clubs in Hollywood, there's sweat all over it, just corroded it.
It was nasty. It was really nasty.
It still functions.
Yeah, it does.
So great gift, and I really appreciate that, and took it to school, and I was the envy of everybody. So this is where fate comes in. I went to California to play drums, met an uncle who knew Don, ended up buying my uncle's machine shop, and then working with Don. He started mentoring me. We developed some products prior to me working at DW, and got a few patents.
Rich was a very, very creative guy. You know, you have a vendor out there who you had known for years, and then his uncle, and then he took over the shop and was running it, and it was in Palmdale, which is quite a ways from where we were. At this point, we moved into Newbury Park. And as time went by and time went by, I kept leaning on him more and more. Hey, I got this idea. Can you make us a prototype? He said, well, I got production going for the last order you gave me of 1,000 of these. I got to stop that if I got to do a couple of this. But somehow he always did it, and we found out some ideas and communicated together, and he invented some things for us in those days. So as time went by, just sitting in my office one day thinking, wouldn't it be great if this guy I'm working with as a vendor actually came in? Why don't we make all this stuff in-house? And you were at the point of not wanting to become a big machine shop and take on a whole bunch of customers, because drumming was really in your psyche. So, but he's in an area that's very economical out there in the heartland, in the desert almost. And I'm saying, any thought you'd want to move in this area here, Thousand Oaks, Newbury Park, and they're like, houses were 4 times more expensive, and it's just like, this would be really a hard thing to do. So, no, I don't know if that's going to exactly work out, but I said, well, what about if I sell you my house and I'll move? And he said, well, maybe I would take a look at that. So that's the way we got him, along with his passion. He would have done it anyway, I know, but that was kind of the closer, if you will, to get Rich to move in and become.
Yeah, that was huge. I mean, this is the house that Don lived in, that he raised his kids in.
Yeah, the whole family
Carrie,
grew up there.
Carrie and Chris were raised there with their sisters.
He didn't kick me out of the house. The kids were growing up by then, so I was planning on moving anyway.
But Chris did have the first right of refusal when I wanted to sell it. So there were a few strings, but we got through those.
And then from there, we started to not only look at what the needs were of the drummers, which is what's driven all of our innovations, but Rich took on another way you could develop products, which is obvious the way it should have been done. John and I were a little bit hammer and sickle. We'd take it down to the welder, move it over here. There's CNC machines now in this world, and other ways you can automate things. There's 3D printers, and I'll fill you in how we've become more engaged with doing all that. So something that would take weeks, if not months, to get a prototype done in the early days, I'm obviously coming up with ideas, as we all are here, and we have the team now here that can spit them out in almost a day. And then how did we run into, there he is, Ruben. How did you hear about us first time?
That's quite a jump from when Rich started to when I started. I only started 10 years ago. You started how many years ago, Rich?
A little closer.
I started doing work, owning the machine shop in 1990, and then they bought my company in 2003. So almost 20 years ago. So I've been an employee for just about 20 years.
And when did you start, like, actually doing R&D? Did you do machine shop first, or?
So a little bit of history, and then we'll
Yeah.
go to when Ruben came in. I told Don we have to bring this up because here's Don and John trying to start a company, run the day-to-day operations, and they're inventing these great products at the same time. Innovation just seemed to be a little side gig for them that they were really good at. When I came on board, I ran the machine shop, and then I ran the hardware department, and then we expanded the machine shop, and then I was able to work with John Good running all of operations. And my little side gig was working on new products along with Don and John. And it was when Ruben came on board where I think we said, you know what, we actually are big enough to actually have an R&D department. He was, I believe, the first full-time innovator we had at DW. I even went for several more years running production, drum production with John, as Ruben was doing that full-time. I was kind of jealous because I thought, how cool would that be, just sit around and think of ideas.
Yeah. That's kind of funny because I actually never realized that. For me, it was always like DW is coming up with so many cool products, and they have like a full-on R&D team going, and I never knew. Yeah, my history, how I got here is also very interesting. I've been working with a race car company, but I've been a drummer for my entire life. I worked my way up in the company, became an engineer later on, and I just happened to be so bored one day that I read a drum company's history online. It was a Chinese drum company that I saw in my friend's music store, and on the very last page of their history, it said that a guy from my company actually designed their latest pedal, drum pedal. And so I just happened to send them an email out of curiosity, like, okay, who was it? Because it wasn't me, it wasn't anybody else here. And they got back to me, and long story short, we started talking, and at some point they invited me to design something for them. And I designed a throw-off for them back then. It was a German company that is the distributor for DW, and they found out that they can actually not produce what I designed for them. They got the patent, they made a great drum kit for me in exchange, but they can't produce it. What I did was race car tolerances and technology, and they couldn't do it in China, so they invited me to go to the factory to China. And that's where I found out that, okay, I have to rethink my way of designing if I want to do drum products. It's just different. And that's where I got in contact with DW people for the first time, because DW was also at that factory producing PDP stuff. And the German company Geva also is a shareholder there, and so we got in contact, and I met Chris there and Dave Leon, and I just loved them. Great people. And then at some point I started working full-time for the German drum manufacturer, and we at some point decided to let the German drum company go away, and I would join the DW team, which was 2012. Yeah, and then brought along a whole bunch of stuff that we developed, and we tried to just fit it into the DW and PDP product line.
Hey, Ruben, I have to interrupt a little bit. When Ruben came over, Chris brought him over, and he said, man, this guy is full of blank and vinegar. Man, he is fired up. He just, he's really smart. He's an engineer. He's worked with race cars. He's worked with Audi, the Audi race team. Audi. And so we brought him over. Really nice guy. You weren't even 30 yet.
Yep.
Just this. Oh, I have John Good calling me. Sorry about that.
Call you out.
He said, don't forget me,
He's
pal.
going to call me next, so I'm going to turn my phone off. Remember to turn your phones off before you do a live stream?
Yeah. So anyway, we literally spent 3 days all day looking at Ruben's ideas that he's had built up in his mind about drum parts, and he had prototypes. It's just a plethora of ideas, and I was so excited just to have someone else on the team and someone that could dedicate it. And, Ruben came from a different world than me. I was self-taught, just learned how to do things when I had to survive to make money. And then I had, from a drummer's point of view, if I had a problem, I'd try to figure out a way to solve it. And I think that's why we got along so well. But having Ruben come in, someone who's actually studied engineering, had degrees, knew machining principles and, plastic principles and casting and all the things that I would guess at and try 100 times before I'd figure it out. He could do a lot of those things on the computer and say, oh, here's the answer. You don't have to spend all that time. So it was a really nice blend for the company to have you.
Interesting from my side, from my point of view, when I first met you guys, and I loved like the first few meetings, but when we started working on actual product, I felt like, okay, this is so hard for me. I mean, why are you doing so many steps on each product? There's so much trial and error and so many prototypes. I'm just like, I'm gonna do the design, I'm gonna finish it all up in my head and then put it in the computer and then just be done, basically.
And then we did a million different prototypes and
Yeah,
tried a million different ways after that.
It was funny, but I started understanding that there's like different ways of accomplishing something, and also how the beauty of mixing those two ways of doing things is. Like, for me, it was great to accept or to actually take on a little bit of the spirit of let's do a prototype in between and see if there's probably another path. We can take something else that comes out of it and not just do it in a theoretical way and then push the button and be done. And I think this is what like helped both sides of the team, like me from my German point and you guys with your way of doing things, and we became a better team through mixing those ways of doing things.
You notice you keep looking at me when you're talking about somebody that makes me do other prototypes and do other things. That was me. We worked well together.
Yeah.
And we had a real R&D department at that point, which was, as you're saying, we lived through that, and that was something new for us. And Connor's experience, seeing the company grow and where we were at that level, and being an innovator, coming up with ideas on your own. Tell a little bit your story.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, when I joined about 5 years ago or so, this was the R&D team. Like, it was my grandpa Don, it was Rich, and it was Ruben. That was the core team. So you mentioned mentorship earlier. I was very fortunate to have these group of guys be my mentors throughout my whole experience at DW. And I still learn from them every single day. I mean, I've jumped around from you guys and, shoot ideas and just see what happens and make stuff, and definitely have more of the trial and error approach, unlike my friend Ruben over there. But
I would say with Connor, I remember talking to your dad, and you went to college for a little bit and decided you wanted to take a little time off, and your dad would tell stories about you just tearing things apart in your garage, and stuff was all over the place. And
I remember cleaning it up.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, by the way.
The family's here
sounds-
laughing, that's true.
that sounds very familiar
Yeah.
to my life, And what's interesting when I look at it now, and we've talked about this, your influence, I believe, from your granddad and myself, is on the side of more trial and error.
Sure.
Right? You have these ideas, we put something together, see if it'll work, and then you have Ruben on the other side of it influencing you. So Connor's kind of this hybrid R&D guy because of that. He's got...
It's a great blend. It's a great blend to have. I have the best of both worlds, in my opinion.
Yeah,
where
and you're like a hardcore researcher, which is also cool. So once you are on something, you just dig deep and find stuff out. Like, he's always helping me out with SolidWorks stuff, which I just work my way around it, and I don't want to go into the YouTube channels and find out, but he does.
That's me. That's where I shine.
I have to say that I remember asking your dad if I could move you into my department. You had worked at the company, obviously, in many, many areas, but I said, let's just move him in R&D. I think he might thrive there. So he agreed. So I feel like I take some credit for that.
You absolutely can.
But I would say I tried to talk you into learning to do computer drawings.
Yep.
And I kept pushing you. Finally, I have to give Ruben credit for this. he pushed you hard enough to where you're like, all right, I'm just going to do it.
Yep.
And it's like just some people that are really good with technology, once they get exposed to it, they just blossom. Yeah, he's gone crazy with it in a tenth of the time that I've seen in other people. So that was waiting there.
What I loved the most about it was it's just doors that keep opening, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no end to what's possible with design in general. And that really appealed to me and my style, is to just keep learning and keep pushing and just see where the possibilities will take everything.
With all this technology and the future we have in front of us, I still pop in with a little drawing on the back of a napkin, and that still works, right?
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
it does.
And we get the ball rolling with that.
Yeah.
Connor found some drawings back in the machine shop the other day. I told him, I said, I have some pedal part drawings I used to do by hand.
I'm like, by hand.
And I thought I was stepping the company up, because Don would just send a sample and say, make this. And I would get these samples. The next sample could be totally different. So over the years, the products would change, and the company wouldn't even know it. So I at least did a hand drawing, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm moving the company into the future, right, with these sketches. And then I finally hired somebody that could do the computer drawings and get some files going. Fast forward to Connor and Ruben, they're like, what is this? You guys are so behind the times. We need to have everything on the computer. You cannot change anything without a written approval.
I try not to put it that blunt, but
And what it is, I feel like I've heard the saying, standing on the shoulders of giants, and I feel like I've been able to do that with you and John, and maybe move some of the things a little further. And then Ruben certainly moved the company further from there. And then I had a conversation with Connor maybe a year ago. I don't know. He seemed frustrated with the movement of things, and why don't we have this? Why don't we have all our drawings and files, and how come they're all over the place? And I said, that's how I felt when Don would send me a part. How come we don't have a hand sketch?
Yep.
This is crazy. I said, that's what you want. You want to see the things that are obvious and move them to the next step. And you and Ruben have
such a
done that.
light bulb moment for me. Such a light bulb
And there's
moment.
going to be a kid one day that's going to come up to you and say, how come you're not,
Yeah,
how come you have all these things on the computer? It should be,
whatever
it
it's
should
going to be.
tacked onto your brain where you just think about it and it's there, right? So
Speaking
it'll
of
happen.
technology, we have a whole other R&D team, because we're talking about DW drums right now, and the team that we have for all of our products. But we have a whole team of engineers that have taken us into a whole new world of DWE. And we also have the other product lines with LP, Josh, other people that work on other products that we have.
I mean, there's a lot of innovation here. Sometimes, most of it, at least in my case, I stumble across things, and Don will say, oh, no one's done that. Let's file a patent. Like I said, if you do enough things, eventually you'll stumble on something good. But to have all these products and not have every company in the world copying it right away, we spend a lot of time getting patents. And Carrie Lombardi
Intellectual
is a
property
huge,
has been a huge part of our, as you walk into our building here, you'll see a smattering of patents against the wall up there. We got about 30 patents in our first 7-8 years, which differentiated us from the competition. And that was, a key. I knew we were going to be making products in America. I knew they were going to have to be more expensive. They had to be different. They had to solve a need. They had to solve a problem for a drummer. They had to be better quality, because they were going to be more expensive, and they had to be a good value for that extra cost. Being a drummer all those years, I kind of saw a whole bunch of holes in the drummer's life that could be filled by better products. Before we even get to the sound of the drums in those days, just thinking of the hardware, tubing that wouldn't crush, chain drive pedals, things that would hold up while they're on the road. Lots of things, we'll touch on a few of them, right here, but no matter what product you have and what idea you get and how much you are separate from the competition, getting a patent on something, I learned through the School of Hard Knocks, is, one of the things you can do. Protecting the patent is a whole other world. And it takes a lot more money to protect a patent than it does to actually get a patent. So I found myself in the earlier days in the 90s as I was, trying to work in a bunch of different capacities within the company, spending a disordinate amount of my time with proprietarily protecting our intellectual property, going after all the companies. You'd go to a trade show, there would be 4 or 5 people from foreign companies that would have your exact same product. You'd have to send them letters, go back and forth. So it was almost becoming somewhat of a full-time job, and Carrie, my daughter, was helping me do that as we were going through this. It had to get to one point where I'm just like, I'm out of this. You're going to have to take it over, because it is a full-time job. Not only being able to grant a patent and get it in the first place, but being able to know how you can protect it. And we have, how many patents now? Probably 80 or so, because there was 60, more than 60 last time I looked.
I know Ruben's got a few, I got a few.
And we're constantly have them going all the time. So that, part of R&D and developing products is protecting the intellectual property of what you have, and that's an equally important part of the equation and of the picture. You can go to the very beginning if you want to hand me that snare drum for a quick second. One thing that is this is one of the first drums we ever made. I just thought it would be funny to bring up. One thing that stimulates innovation is no money. If you don't have money to do something in a certain way, you just have to come up with anything you could do to try and make it work. And we were able to make a snare drum out of the original tooling, dies, and molds, but we had no throw-off, and I didn't know what to do. But I looked at my luggage at home, and there was a luggage latch on it that had a little lock on it that flipped open when you closed your luggage. So I just took it off my luggage, drilled a T into the bottom of it, hooked up the snare wires, drilled out a lug from a cheaper drum set, put a rod through it and a T at the bottom of it, and we had a throw-off. And that was the beginning of the way you can solve a problem.
That's amazing.
That went down. The pedals were the same thing. We had the tooling, dies, and molds to make a single bass drum pedal. The challenge was, how much stuff can you make out of the tooling, dies, and molds to make a single bass drum pedal? And what did we come up with? First was the idea, which was not an invention. It was something done by a guy in New York, and we bought his patent. He was only doing it out of his drum shop. Chain and sprocket on a pedal, which solved the problem of the leather strap or polypropylene strap or direct connection ever wearing out. So it took what was a great feeling pedal, the Camco pedal, which is basically what I'm holding here with the DW 5000 footboard on it. Why is it called the 5000? Because that was the model number in the Camco catalog. I obviously didn't have the rights to the name Camco. That was sold to a Japanese company, Hoshino. But I had all the tooling, dies, and molds that actually made it. So I was kind of saying to the dealers, this is the original, this is the 5000, just like you used to always get, only it's the DW 5000 now. And we solved a bunch of problems that you've had with the previous version of the pedal. Chain and sprocket makes it last. Then we took a look at all the other areas of the pedal that could wear out, because drummers were playing in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, this would work, and you would fold it up and put it in your trap case. Now we're talking about cymbal stands that are like a forklift. You need to move them around. Guys weren't so concerned about, putting everything into one case and walking it into the gig. So why couldn't you make a pedal that was like one piece? So we came up with the idea. It was the first company to have a plate that locked in the heel to the front of the pedal, which everybody did at one point. Yeah, which would be this. So it's all one solid part.
Which we still do today.
Yeah, and about just off the top of my head, 5 or 6 other areas that we had patentable on the pedal. We put ball bearings in the hinge to take away any friction that would be there. We put ball bearings in the rocker. We used really good precision ball bearings that are very expensive, not standard ball bearings. And then what else can you do with the castings that happen to make a single pedal? Ta-da, you make a
machined pedal.
And a double pedal.
And a double pedal.
Right. So the next evolution that really put us on the map was making a double pedal. And that took all the parts we had for the single pedal and with a universal assembly turned it into a double. We were the first company to have a functioning, really working double pedal. Then it was a matter of improving it, which is where all the technology came involved with the machine shop and what you guys do. Also we had the EP1, grab that. This is another thing you can
talk
do
about electronic
castings to a single pedal.
Electronic technology back in the 80s.
This was in 1980. We made the first triggering independent bass drum pedal where piezo would be in here, and you would reach it down and trigger it. This is when Simmons was really popular. Remember back in those days? And that was a good selling product for us for a while. Then we took the hi-hat and took it to the next level. We were the first hi-hat pedal that operated off of a chain pull, direct pull drive. And then evolving into me walking in and saying, what if, we could make a pedal that was machined where you could adjust the spring and the stroke adjustment without taking it off? And I just come up with those ideas, and it's like, I don't think it can be done. I don't know. Nobody's ever been able to do that before. And then I walk back like a month later, and it's like, hey, check this out. Take a look at it. How did that come into being?
I'll hand it to Rich if you want.
Everything was a challenge, right? Either Don or John or even some other members of the team or sales, or we have customers out there that break things and they ask for improvements. And Don had requested a few things over the years. And literally we would walk around with different parts of a pedal trying to figure out how to make it easier. Since most of us were drummers, there were frustrations at gigs or things would break. So I would say just in general, all the improvements stemmed from frustrations, things breaking, customers calling us and asking for more. This pedal, we kind of jumped from the 5 all the way up to a machine pedal. We had the 9 in between there. We had many iterations of the 5. The 5 is still one of the best-selling pedals in the world to this day, and it's all based off that original pedal that Don was holding.
Taking it up, it was the 5, the round sprocket on the 5, the accelerator sprocket on the 5, the round one we called the turbo.
Right.
Spent a lot of money to come up with, when you're coming up with a name that you're associating with something, these companies have these big marketing departments, and they huddle around and they spend hours and weeks coming up with what's the name that you want to have for something like that. So should I tell them how
I
the
think
great
you should tell
expense
them how
we
you
came-
came out with some of these. A
the
lot
great
of money was
expense we
spent.
came up with that, yeah. We had the round sprocket, which I showed you a little earlier, and that was just the chain drive pedal. When we came out with the accelerator, which was the offset sprocket, which is the reason for that, it plays a little bit faster under your foot when you're close to the bass drum with the beater ball. I felt we had 2 pedals that had 2 different drives, so I had to come up with a name for each one of them. So John Ferraro was visiting, picking up a pedal and a snare drum. I said to him, earlier in the day, I just need to come up with a name for this pedal. And I carried his snare drum to his car with him, and he opened up the back of the trunk, a Volvo, and when he shut it, it was the Volvo Turbo. So I just said, there's the name right there. So another guy came out, and he had converted his footboard on the pedal to the actual accelerator of his Volkswagen van. So it's like, well, the other one's the accelerator. So you just, ideas, you all here and everybody out there can come up with great ideas. And let us know if you do come up with them, because we're always talking to people, and most of our influences come a lot from what we hear.
True. Yeah, Don, 2 things. One, and Don's alluded to this quite a bit, but I think with innovation, there's really 3 things that we think about. One is there has to be a problem to solve, right? And there's plenty of those. Whatever you do, I enjoy bike riding as well as drumming. So I'll ride my bike, and I'm always thinking of something that could be better. I know Ruben and Connor are the same way. Whatever they're into, or whatever you guys are into, you're going to say, wow, I wish it did this or it did that. So those are the things we work on. Those are the problems. And then number 2, and you talked about this as well, limited resources, money, and people, right? If you have as many people or as much money as you want, you probably will never find a solution. I think you have to be a little desperate and put some pressures on yourself. And then the other part of it is actual time. You could have no money, but all the time, and you'll never come up with an answer. So having the problem, having limited time and limited money, you're going to come up with things. And I think that's where we've been. And there's times where DW's had more money than other times, and a lot of times, it's barely getting by. And I would say some of those times where things are really tight, we've come up with the best, most innovative things. But I don't know, I think it's just human nature that way.
And if we talked a little earlier, if you do have questions in the chat, you could let us know. And Connor, this is a very leading question.
Yeah, thank you.
I see you have your phone on a stand. Who came up with that idea, and who actually built it from scratch?
Yeah, this was one of my first kind of design projects that Rich tasked me with. I'm not a drummer. My grandpa Don tried to teach me when I was younger, but it never really stuck with me. There was a different type of creativity that I wanted to do, and drumming wasn't really it. But I went through a phase starting working at DW where I wanted to, okay, I should probably learn how to play the drums, and I'm with these great guys. They all know how to play drums, and I kind of want to feel a part of the team a little bit more. So yeah, I'll try drumming. But I had a problem where I would have my headphones in, plugged into my phone, and I didn't know where to put my phone. Because everywhere I put the easiest place to put my phone was on the floor tom, but if I wanted to use the floor tom, the phone's going to vibrate from the floor tom, so I got to make something. So I went to my computer and I drew up this little cradle for my phone, put it next to the hi-hat, so I just had a place to put my phone. And I think you came into the practice room and saw it, and then from there it kind of came into a new product.
So you're skipping a couple steps.
Oh, am I?
One, and I'll just give you an example of how things work, and I think why things saved his life again.
We're going to invent a better seat as soon as this is done.
Thanks, Connor. I know we set that up ahead of
thank
time.
you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Okay, so
I'm skipping steps.
you're skipping some steps, right? So here's what happened to me once when Ruben came on board. I came up with what I thought was one of the coolest inventions I ever came up with, totally by accident. And I showed Ruben, and he's looking at it, and he goes, "Yeah, that's pretty good. I think you could do a little better, though." I swear I
Sounds like Ruben.
bit my tongue in half, but I swallowed my pride, and I listened to him, and I did go back. He knows about this because we still do this to this day. We really challenge each other. Connor came up with a pretty good phone holder, but I said, well, what if you have headphones? Or what if you need to put it on the other side of the kit? And how much is the tooling going to cost? And he's like,
I don't know.
it is what it is. You got to. So he got a little bit of that frustration, but I think in the end, it turned out to be a really good, versatile product.
Totally.
I mean, for your first product, it's crazy good. But I have to thank Ruben for that. I think most people from his country are a little more upfront about how they really feel. In the U.S., at least for myself, I tend to, make things a little softer. And
Where do I fit into that picture when I walk in sometimes and just go, what?
you had a really nice way of doing it. You're like, oh, that's pretty neat. But what if you'd always just suggest something else? But Ruben, man,
It's pretty good, but I'd never put something out like this. Maybe we'll work on it a little bit more, guys.
Yeah, but what I like from what you just talked about is there's one side that a lot of people don't see about the R&D department. It's working with the vendors. Like from when you started working with vendors in the U.S., then at some point overseas, having your own operation in Taiwan, being part holder of the factory in China. This has always been a big part of our job, together with the purchasing department, with Dave and Jeff and everybody. Just go in there and finding the best way or the most efficient way to do a product, and with different goals. And one of the most fun things for me, and where I basically learned the most, was getting into that whole playing field of PDP drums and hardware. Because when I started, this was more... It was just brand managed. There wasn't a whole bunch of R&D in there. They just released the concept drums, which was serious drums, but the hardware was still like in the starting phase. So I felt like this is great because I can do stuff there, and nobody at DW really has a problem with me doing it, and like points at the history. Oh, we can't do this or we can't do that. I can just do it. And what I found out was like it's actually fun to have those limitations, as you said earlier, because with PDP I always had to hit price points, and so you have to get creative with the manufacturing methods. And me coming from the machinist race car side, where budget is not an issue, to like one of my first products with PDP was the first concept pedal. Like this is the second generation, but making a pedal that retails for like $100 or $110, but feels like a pedal that I love to play, like out of the box, not too many adjustments, but that's a pedal that I would play any day of the week. Like that was a challenge for me, but it was so much fun actually to accomplishing that.
PDP was bringing up a very good point, was a bit of a change in our philosophy altogether, because with DW it was like we're going to make the best we possibly can and then sit down with a calculator and figure out how we can make it as affordable as possible, but without changing any of the, same thing with the drums, without changing any of the specs on it. PDP was making something that was the best value you could ever have at a certain price point. And that's, you know, you're a master at that. Plus dealing with factories offshore where you have new people making your products all the time in the factory, as opposed to DW where people have been there 15, 20, 30 years. They know a ball bearing if it's not working well in their sleep before they even get there that day. And that's something you've done so well with. So PDP kind of came at the beginning from being at a PAS show at one point, and I remember this young drummer came up, college student, and he just said, we had our drum set, 1 or 2 drum sets behind us, we had our pedals out on a table, and he said, I've been saving up for 2 years to get one of your pedals. And I thought, oh God, this guy is going to save up for the rest of his life to get a drum set. We got to come up with something that's going to fill that need. And that's when we thought, you know, PDP would be a great way to offer drummers something at the best value they could possibly have, better than anything else they could ever get for that amount of money, at a certain price point, while we continue to do what we're doing. And you've done a great job at that, Ruben.
Thank you.
And Connor works with you on a lot of those things too.
Yeah,
back and
it was
forth.
one of his first assignments.
Yep.
But probably your first in R&D.
It was.
We sent him to Taiwan for 1.5 months, 2 months, 3 months, I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
So excuse me. So
Yeah, you
he's in high school, and Chris is here, and say what's he doing, and what's he taking in high school? And if you're in high school and you're Southern California, you're going to take Spanish, right? So it'd be a great language to learn and to master. So I said, so what are you taking Spanish? And he says, no, I'm studying
Chinese.
I said, I see it coming. You're going to be over there one day.
I thought it was a joke. I thought you were joking. I'm going to be over there one day.
No, he spent several months over there. That was, what a way to get initiated into an R&D team.
Yeah, that was one of my first projects. It was a trip with Rich, my dad, and Ruben was there.
So your dad had something come up, and one of my tasks was to get you there safely.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And then leave you there and come back. They forgot to
said,
tell
"When's
you
he
that
coming
part of the
back?"
trip.
Yeah, there was no return ticket.
Yeah.
It was great.
They bought me a one-way ticket to Asia. Thank you.
Yeah, you lived in a hotel?
Yeah, a hotel for
kind
like-
of a room.
Yeah, this is a long-term hotel for like 3 months or something.
But he did like take care of the relationships with the vendors, that
Yeah, it
things
was
that you
great.
started, and then
Yeah.
you and John maintained, and then Rich, you took over a lot of this together with Dave and everybody, and then you, next generation, picked up the relationships with our vendors, which is so important. Like this is always one key to success for DW, is like being super consistent with our vendors, with our manufacturing methods, and having our own factory in China allows us to do that, and having all those vendors in Taiwan and our own facility there allows us to do this as well.
So you're bringing up some international vendors which have been phenomenal, right, when we work with them. But we have some U.S. vendors. I have a vendor here, JD, from White Rhino, good friend of mine, and great vendor. When we were making the machine pedal, we're still making the machine series in California. I would say about 75% of it is made in the U.S., and it's fully assembled in the U.S. There's some components coming from overseas, but JD I think he still loses sleep over trying to polish the footboards on our direct drive and our machine drive pedals. But it's gorgeous. I mean, to try to do this, he machines this at his shop. He machines the heels, but he takes them to another place to have them polished and anodized. Each one is done by hand in the U.S., so you can imagine the cost on something like that. And he has some relationships where they can get these that are pretty reasonable price, but it's a constant quality battle. For the price of this pedal, because of all the components, it's extremely high priced, and we're making it mostly in the U.S. If there's one scratch or one flaw in the color, it gets scrapped. And to scrap that footboard is a pricey thing. So
Yep.
I think JD has a whole big scrap bin full of old footboards. Eventually, we're going to figure out what to do with them, though. So
And pedals-
thanks for that. And not only JD and his company, I mean, we have laser engraved companies, we have plating companies, I have 3 or 4 machine shops that they bend over backwards to get us the best pricing and keep us competitive here in the U.S. So without them, we just don't have the capacity in-house. It kind of goes back to when you guys started. You try to do as much as you can in-house, but you can't possibly do it. You have to rely on other people, and those relationships have been great.
And pedals were our really first entree into getting market share. If you look at it like that, where most drummers were using the DW pedal because it was solving a lot of problems for them that they had experienced with other pedals in the past. Then we got into the whole area of stands and had a rack system, which we still do, and a lot of innovations. You look at a cymbal stand, it's like, well, what can you do different to a cymbal stand? And there's a lot you could do different to a cymbal stand, we found out. One, using excellent quality tubing so that it doesn't crush. Cymbal stands heretofore had teeth in the tilter, and something that, if you're looking at a band, there's a drummer, and then there's the rest of the band. At some point in each one of those people's lives, they decided what they wanted to play. And they want to play guitar, they want to play bass. Drummer kind of is the strange guy. There's a reason why he wants to play drums more than anything else. He's attracted to that. He has a certain personality. Not that you just want to beat something, but you want to be part of the rhythm. You know, you want to interact with the rest of the people. We always say the drummer is the leader of every band, but we won't. You know, that's kind of the inside drum channel at DW.
Actually,
know,
it is true.
We know that's true. Yeah, right. We don't want to get any drummers out there in trouble with their bands, but they like to have things kind of where you can't get them. So all other cymbal stands had teeth where they would go in increments from here down to there, down to there. But geez, can I get it in the middle between those two? And it's like, well, no, you can't. So how do we solve that problem? Well, we did a toothless tilter, which was, we came up with the idea, the concept. We tried them, they didn't work. We tried them again, they slipped, they didn't work. Ildefonso, who worked with us, one of our second, third employees, drilled one a little off center so that it pushed up against the other side, not to get too geeky about this, and it worked just fine. So then my concern was, what if you pack it up in a stand, because John Good was a roadie in those days, and this was another thing. You could have everything as good as you wanted, but if this gets hit when you're packing it up, then the tilter is going to move and it's not in the same place. So we put this drum key screw here, which we called a tech lock, and they all like that. If you're a drum tech, you're going to be able to lock it in place, regardless what happens with the tension of the actual screw. So these are just little things. Putting boom arm memory locks, things where you could set it up the same time after time. Having different weight stands. We did our 5,000 stand, we did our 9,000 stand. Then we thought we'd go a little lighter, 7,000. Then I got older, and I was like carrying our 9,000 down the hall one day, and it was like I felt like I was working out at the gym. I'm thinking, guys do this all day long. So we thought, what if we had an ultra lightweight cymbal stand? And
Yeah,
that was a wrestle. That was something that I got some feedback on that one. Like
That one, we actually asked Ruben to handle that and come up with some designs to lighten it up and yet make it strong enough. And that's been a really nice moving product for
It was
us,
like
and
the goal was
people
like
love it.
a 2-pound cymbal stand, something like that, and you wanted the offset hi-hat. You wanted a hi-hat design that actually works the way you have it on the 6000, but in a lighter way, not big castings and everything. And it took a little bit for us to get it done, but it was one of the coolest projects in hindsight.
And it was made top quality, so it wasn't inexpensive. It wasn't like the lighter the stand, the less expensive. That was kind of the mantra. When people would look at cheaper hardware, it would be smaller tubing, smaller stands. We wanted to make it the same quality, but make it lighter weight. So the question always internally was, well, I don't think that's going to sell very well. And at the end of the day, it became one of our more popular cymbal stands that we've ever done.
Both Don and Ruben kind of alluded to this earlier, but I want to give everyone just an idea of what it's like day to day at DW. You see seems like a ton of products here, right? Like, it just seems like we're coming up with stuff all the time. But in reality, if you want to change something with DW on it, it's an act of Congress.
Yes.
It takes a long time.
Notice he's looking at me when he says that, too.
Well, it's because John Good's not here as well.
Don, Act of Congress, Lombardi.
So we actually started we wanted to change a tube joint, and you can point to the
This
tube
is
joint there.
This is like the very first one
So-
that he had tooled.
In 50 years, there have been 3 or 4 different ones, right? So,
Well, from the very, very beginning, and then the second one, yeah. So this
right,
would be- this
but
would be
really,
three.
over the last, I don't know, 20 years, there's been 2 different styles, and we've been wanting to change it up or modernize it. And Don keeps saying it works great. You have to have a reason. He reminds me that you have to have a problem to solve.
Which is one of the coolest things at DW, I thought, that we keep reminding each other of the mission statement. And you did that from the beginning to me. It's probably my learning curve. Like, always pointing at the mission statement.
So you can't just walk in and say, here it is, here's the new DW. You have to have some reasons. You have to convince people. You have to prove to them that it's better. And those are some restraints. I think having those are a good thing. So we're not just coming out with a bunch of junk. So in order to change this tube joint, which has been on our task list since Ruben started 10 years ago, we finally agreed that we would change our entry-level series of stands first. And Ruben headed up this project. Connor was kind of getting involved at that point, and they came up with a new style tube joint for the 3000. And over the last year, we've been having extremely serious discussions. You would think,
I'm just sitting here listening, or we're opening this up to the whole world.
Well, I just
which
want
we
to.
have been.
I just feel that.
So basically what he's saying is they have one opinion and I have another opinion. And we haven't quite decided.
So we'd like a vote. No, I'm kidding. We're going to hold one up. So we started with the 3000, and now we're going to go and change the 5 and the 9 to kind of change the theme of those to match the 3. But as you do that, we have pretty good selling hardware. How do you make it better or solve more problems? So
Well, actually, and every time I go into my office, I see the new 3000 there. Somehow, I'll then take it back down. So I think there's just a subliminal thing, like if I see it long enough, and sure enough, it's actually working.
Rich, he's onto us.
Without changing the form and function of it here at 50 years, we could make it look a little bit sleeker by having the front of it rounded off just a little bit, which for the DW 5000 version would make it look more finished if you were to not have a memory lock or need a memory lock for your stands, because you wouldn't have the place where the memory is locking into it. So stay tuned, because the final verdict isn't here yet, but we'll be back into it in 2 days, as a matter of fact, when we get back to the shop, as Ruben is
that is
visiting
on
us.
our list to finalize.
So see what happens in the future.
Yeah. So that tension and that little bit of butting the heads in the behind the closed
Yeah, I
doors
could,
it's all positive. We're
All
all wanting
drummers
the
say
best thing.
that the coolest thing about their playing or they're playing their solos is tension and release. And Sure enough, we have it right here in the old R&D team too, right? Maybe a little different definition of tension and release, but the same, exact same idea.
You know, Don, we could keep going on here all day talking about products and potentially, you know, getting into some real nitty gritty. We don't have a lot of time. I wanted to make sure that we just, you know, you talked about the DWE team. You know, they have an R&D team as well. We're really one big team, but Dave Coons heads up that side of it, and along with that, they have electronic engineers that we work with all the time, because a lot of the mechanical parts of the new electronic kit interface with the electronics, obviously. Connor, I don't know, did you bring up a symbol?
I got one.
We wanted to show you a little bit of our side of it and working with the team. Connor actually did a good part of the design for an electronic symbol, and if you guys had a chance to see it unveiled the other day, these things, you tap on them and they sound like a table, but when you turn the electronics on and you put both teams together, the mechanical team and the electronics team together, you come up with this beautiful sound. And the really nice thing is you could turn it off in your living room, so you're not waking up the neighbors. But to come up with this, it took some years, and it took probably a couple times a week talking with the team, having Ruben involved, having the engineers involved, having Dave involved, to come up with something that is going to work time after time, where you can squeeze it like a real cymbal, where you can play the bell and not hear a ride.
Yep.
It looks simple, it looks clean, but it's just that collaboration, and I would say a lot of your knowledge that you've learned over the years, passing it through Ruben and your granddad, has kind of come to fruition here. So
Yeah, this eDrum project has been exactly that, a culmination, I think, of all of our experiences and strengths to make this product. And yeah, I think that's really what it came down to.
And
We're making the physical part of the product, then there's the technical part of the product,
Absolutely.
which is engineers, which we hadn't had in the company prior to this,
Right.
who are really looking at how this was giving them a problem, which I can have no control over at all how it's solved. But as Chris said early on in the project years ago, you know, if we were going to do this, how could we do it if it was wireless? Well, it can't be done. So, and I've learned one thing, I think it's been a mantra of DW. Once somebody says something can't be done, look out, because that's going to never stop us. We're going to be sure we figure out some way to do it. But it is amazing. We showed it to all of our dealers and distributors a couple of days ago, and their jaws just dropped that you could have wireless technology that was perfected. But that's kind of answers another question I'll bring up right now, which is going to be one that I get asked a lot. What about Slingerland, which is a brand that we acquired some time ago? And what about Slingerland is our R&D department and team has been focused completely on the eDrums for this past year, which I totally agreed with. So in Rich's office is getting a stack of my napkins that I've written things on the back of we're going to be getting to really soon as we progress through.
It is funny when we look at the lists that we have. I hear other companies and talk to different people that innovate for various brands, and they're searching for the next idea. We have pages and pages of ideas we just haven't got to yet. And yeah, the eDrum project certainly became a focus for a good part of our team for many years. So having Dave Coons and having a bigger team now is going to allow us to really focus in on Slingerland. Bringing that up, I'm going to make sure we do a shout out to Josh Trask, who's part of our R&D team. He's out of town with a family commitment, and he would be up here with us as well. So Josh really focuses in on LP, although for the last about year we've stole him for DWE as well. But he's the cajon guy. He's the innovator for anything wood. He made the skateboard that's out in the gift shop here. Connor and him made the coasters at our shop. So having these kind of resources is just phenomenal. For the other brands, for LP and for PDP and for Gretsch, we have brand managers. Those guys innovate all the time. between Derek, Rob, and Andrew. Those guys are coming up with ideas all the time and challenging our team. They're working directly with vendors and creating products. So it's amazing how the team has now grown, and hopefully it's maintaining the vision you've had.
Absolutely, and obviously our artists are a big contributor to ideas that we have. And you're a DW artist if you have a DW drum set or DW pedal, or if you're watching out there, you don't have to be a great pro drummer to come up with a great idea. So we're always open ears to hear about ideas you might have that would solve a problem that you've got out there that we might not even be thinking about.
Don, here's a quick story maybe to come close to a close here. Talk about innovation, and anybody can innovate. Everybody has ideas. I remember Don telling me this story. It's prior to me getting there. He had always encouraged any employee, whether you're a drummer or not, if you work at the company, to bring your idea forward. And an employee that worked, I believe, in purchasing came up with our STM, the way we hold.
No, he was a outside contractor working on our IT, working on our
Okay, it was an
computers.
IT guy, you know, and I have JD over here at Outside Machine Shop coming up with ideas, you know, and all those things lend themselves to great products. I mean,
I was trying to figure out with John the best shell construction so that the floor tom would sustain as long as possible, as if it was suspended. So I would lift it up off the ground by holding the lugs, and John would hit it. I'd set it back down, and it would be dead. We'd try other legs, try other combinations, lift it up. And this poor guy's working on the computer in the same room. So after about an hour of us going through all different types of compositions of angles and things, of floor tom legs, we finally got one where when you set it on the ground, it sustains exactly as long as if you lift it up. So he just looked over and said, you know, if you want a rack tom to suspend, why don't you hold it up from the lugs the same way you're holding it up with your hands? And he got the patented on that, and we made the STM, and that we've used for many, many years.
to this day.
To this day, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, these
exactly.
are that idea that guy had.
Hold it up from the lugs.
Yeah, I
So-
thought he was an employee, but he was actually working in the shop, in the office when he did it. Okay.
So,
That's
well, he was outside, he was just the IT guy we hired from
Right.
the outside. He was coming in, yeah, to do it.
But he was there.
Jeff
That's
Faulkner.
cool. Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Rich.
Yeah, thanks, Don. And yeah, thanks for mentoring me. And hopefully I've been able to pass that along. I know Ruben
Absolutely.
Yeah.
is mentoring. Connor's working with other people now that we have that he's mentoring. So I think that's what's going to keep the company great. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're back to my stack of napkins on your desk, starting
Yes, yes, I look forward to that.
moving forward as we always do.
Thanks
you,
you guys
Ruben.
for coming out. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you, everybody out there. Again, keep in touch with us. That's what makes this work. It's a two-way conversation all the time.
Absolutely.
See you next time. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for your time with us. The excitement continues because we've got Dave Elliott doing a masterclass at 1:30 and Cora Coleman at 5:30. So come back or watch the live stream, and we'll see you later. Thank you. Thank you, guys.